Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Tough Leaf Ply webinar. My name is Shauna Randolph, and I'm the Head of Business Development at Tough Leaf. I'm here today with Dave Wichter and Darian Miller, co-founder and CEO and co-founder and COO of Ply, one of Tough Leaf's valued capacity building partners. So Dave and Darian, welcome back to Tough Leaf.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Great. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So today we're going to learn about simplified materials management for contractors and service businesses. Efficient materials management can set contractors apart and in many cases make or break existing bottom line goals. Today, Dave and Darian will deep dive into the intricacies of materials management, field tracking, effective purchasing, and streamlined operational processes, all tailored specifically for contracting business. But first, a little housekeeping. This is a live conversation, so please stay on mute. If you can do that, by clicking the little microphone in the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom window. And you'll also see a video camera next to the mic. If you can, please come on screen. We'd love to see you. We'll have a live Q&A at the end of the session, and we'll ask that you hold your questions until then. If you have a question during the webinar, please feel free to enter it into the chat, and we'll collect them for the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared at a later date. As a mission-driven company, we'll aim to provide opportunities to diverse firms at no cost and support them by providing a trusted group of capacity building services so they can grow and scale their business. If you're a diverse firm, claim your profile on toughleaf.com so we can provide you with relevant targeted opportunities that match your profile. And Rajab will also put the link in the chat for you to receive the link to claim your profile. Now I'm excited to hand it over to Dave, who will introduce you to Ply, our newest capacity building partner. Dave, we're happy to have you as part of the team.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Let me share my screen. Great. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, we're very happy to be here. One thing that Darian and I set out to achieve when we kicked off Ply is we want to tackle a big problem for contractors. We know materials management is one of them, but we want to do it in a very simplified manner. Darian and I have a lot of product and software experience. And so when we built Ply, we wanted to make sure that we're taking something that could definitely get complex as businesses scale, and we're simplifying it down to just a small amount of features and functionality to really help with bottom line and push the needle when it comes to operational efficiencies. A little bit about Ply before I let Darian kind of take it and run with it. Again, our mission is to simplify materials buying and management for SMB contractors. So we exclusively work with smaller contractors that really are starting to feel the pains when it comes to scale, whether it be trying to hire new people, managing materials, purchasing materials, trying to cut down on costs. We fit in on the materials management side, and we feel like that's a big part of operational efficiencies. That's where we're going to stay. But just know we're there for support with our customers, and that's kind of how we fit in. We work with owners and leaders. We work with techs. We work with project managers wherever companies are. That's where we fit in and really help find those efficiencies when it comes to all things materials management. As far as the agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about materials management. Some of it might be obvious, some of it you might already know. But what we want to do is really kind of kick off these conversations. We want to share some of our knowledge, some of our experiences working with contractors, and then also learn from you all. So, as Shauna mentioned, when you have questions, put them in the chat because we would love to kind of engage with you when we get through this presentation. So we'll talk about materials management, purchasing and negotiations. We'll do a little inventory case study that was very fun for us early on in our business. We'll talk about internal processes, and then how does it tie all together? And then obviously save some time at the end for Q&A. But without further ado, I'll let Darian take it from here.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, excited to be here and learn from you all. a little bit about materials management. So when Dave and I first started this, we were really in a learning capacity. Both of us do have a little bit of background working in the contracting space, but materials management was something that we found to be something that was very painful for contractors, especially at the SMB stage. Really quickly to define what materials management is. Materials management is the process of planning, organizing, and controlling the flow of materials from the point of origin, so in this case, a supplier, to the point of consumption, your end businesses, which could be commercial or residential. And when you really start to break down the main functions of materials management, there is a lot of different steps. There's identification of the product, there's sourcing with your suppliers, there's doing price comparisons and shopping for lead times or best pricing. There's purchasing it and getting payment, which sometimes when you're working with suppliers, depending on how technical they are, can also be a challenge. There's inventory management. So if you're doing auto replenishments or just stocking inventory, you want to make sure that you have track of what that inventory is so you can pick it and put it in the trucks. There's logistics and transportation support. So if you're working with large equipment, making sure you have the right permits, making sure you have the right crane operators so that it arrives at the job site in time. There's competition. And then finally, there's tracking of all of this. How do you get better? And how do you not stay stagnant as a business? Go next. So really quickly, some common misconceptions. You may relate to some of these, or maybe you've even worked at a company that has some of these. But a lot of times what we see is when we talk to businesses is the owner is the person doing a lot of the procurement, and they think they're the best ones for it. A lot of times that's the case. They may have established relationships with suppliers, but there are people out there that this is their expertise, and they have a lot of experience in it. So as an owner, one thing that you can potentially think about is finding an advocate or someone you can teach to offset purchasing materials for you. Doing this won't save me time in the long run. Doing this specifically, spending some time creating a process around materials management. This is time consuming. Yes, we know this is time consuming. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be tracking it and trying to get better at it. It's not worth the time. I've been doing this for 20 years, possibly, but a lot of things have changed in 20 years. A lot of technology has come into place, i.e. Ply, and there's a lot of things that you can take advantage of to create those operational efficiencies. I've tried this before, it doesn't work. Software won't help me. And I have a great relationship with one of my suppliers, and I only work with one. And so you can see there's a host of misconceptions about why you may not be willing to take the next step. But I can assure you, hopefully you learn a little bit throughout this process from what we've learned in building this piece of technology. On the right, you can see this is actually some really good handwriting. We get a lot of contractors that send us things like this, and just wanted to point out that this is time consuming to write, and take inventory of this. And again, this may be the best way to do it 20 years ago, but there's definitely a more efficient way to do it. Next. And what are the impacts from all of this, right? So you have a lack of visibility. So you will breed a culture that is very frustrated and doesn't have the ability to do their jobs. A lot of the people that are hired as technicians, they really are passionate about fixing and solving problems. And when stunted with, trying to buy materials or, not having the visibility, it's really difficult to, get past that. Misbuying or overbuying, this leads to overspending, holding inventory, and just an inability to recoup costs, especially if you can't return those items. Project delays. So again, your reputation and reputational risk is really predicated on being able to find the materials when you need it, setting those expectations with the customer, saying, we'll have this done in a week. And if you do it in 2, well, you may have a potentially lost customer or a bad relationship right off the bat. And then finally, sourcing issues. COVID really put a wrench into the supply, the logistics of sourcing supplies. And, they're really starting to recoup now, but, it's still difficult. And sourcing issues are so prevalent throughout the industry. Next. But you don't have to do all of this at once, right? So when Dave and I onboard customers, a lot of times they really want to take and do everything at the same time. It's a 0 to 100%, or we're not launching. You don't have to take it all on once. This is always going to be a process that you refine as long as you commit to it. I really love this graph here. It shows even if you do 1% every day, you're going to be 37% better over that time period. And if you do 1% worse every day, you can see kind of the outcome here. So it's really just making sure that you're taking 1% at a time, day by day, and ensuring that you're just kind of moving the needle 1% per day. Next. So let's get into it. So some best practices, tools, and some tips. Again, like I mentioned, start small. When you're doing, and we're going to get into the details of doing an audit, and even provide some resources, free resources for you to take your own next steps. But really, the number one thing I tell people is really just starting small. Strive for 10% in your first couple of months. You don't need to get to 100%. Always have a vision, and have some inspiration. But 10% can save you thousands of dollars in operational costs, non-billable time, and really just utilizing your resources a little bit better. If you're a company that is in a position to utilize technology, please take a look at what's out there in the market. Obviously, we're biased with Ply. We do have a piece of software that will help procure and manage all your materials. But there's a lot of stuff out there, and you can even, again, start small. One of the things that we'll show you today is how you can do some of this in Excel and using Google Docs to get to that first step. And then make sure you test, learn, and share. So what's really important is that you start a foundation with your team so that you put these procedures in place to see what's working, to see what's not working. One of the things that Dave and I have really learned throughout this process is not every company is the same. It's really hard to build a piece of software that tailors to every single business because everyone operates slightly different. And that's totally fine. But that's actually fun and the beauty of it. So this is why internally you should test, learn and share with your team, and have a culture and openness to say, hey, this isn't working, or hey, this is something that we need to change, but don't give up. That's the number one thing. This is a pretty arduous task. It's big, especially if you have a large amount of inventory, or you're trying to change a pretty antiquated process. All right, so let's get into purchasing and negotiations. Okay, so the first things I want to mention here around your core purchasing actions. So there's three main core purchasing actions. There's inventory replenishment, which is the restocking of the warehouse, making sure that your trucks have every material that they need so that they can have those operational efficiencies and you don't have situations where they're going to Home Depot or they're going to Ferguson in the middle of the day. Those specialty parts, these are the hard things. These take a lot of time and sometimes can make or break a job. We've had situations where $20 parts have really stunted a job from getting done. And Ply can actually help be there for events like that to help you get through that and using our network of suppliers. And then project and bill of material purchasing. So these are larger lists. These can come from takeoffs, submittals, et cetera. But these are really the core purchasing actions that we'll talk through today and ground ourselves in. But there's a whole bunch of other purchasing activities here that you may not even realize that you're doing and you're kind of on autopilot that really could use some help. And those include returns. This is a very difficult task because, again, it's not billable and it's a mistake. Something happened and you have to take time out of your day to drop it back off a supplier or organize pickup or delivery. And then getting payment for that is also slightly annoying. Replacements, replacement parts are difficult to find at times, and having them on stock is also something that needs to be tracked. And then obviously misbuying or misdiagnosing sometimes leads to parts not arriving at the job and really impacting your margins of completing your jobs. When you're working with suppliers, we really see the best outcome when you're working with 5 to 8 suppliers. So I know that may seem like a lot, but if you grow your supplier base to about 5 to 8, you'll actually optimize for lead time and cost saving potential. And what we've seen in our data is when you reach 5 to 8, or more, there's a little bit of diminishing return after that. Like if you have 20 different bids for a project, you're going to start to see about the same different pricing bands. So the sweet spot that we tell customers and what we work with on Ply is really trying to get 5 to 8 quotes. This establishes a great pricing band for you. It ensures that you're able to see a mix of partial bids and full bids. and then optimize around lead time. With Imply, we have the ability to automatically find you the best lead time and pricing through our algorithm. But again, you can do this yourself too, and we'll show you in an Excel sheet shortly, how you can actually optimize for this on your own if software isn't the next step for you. Some common mistakes. So we see a lot of common mistakes with the communication and ordering the wrong part number. So sometimes you may only be able to find a plate like this, and it's difficult to get the model number or serial number. And if you're sending this to a supplier, they're going to have a hard time getting this information. I actually had to use AI to pull out the numbers here because they're so difficult to read. So we basically like changed the background and was able to pull out the numbers to identify it. Now there's all kinds of OCR and other technology that could be used out in the field to accomplish this. But sometimes this is going to either cause a misdiagnosis or the ability for you not to get the right part. Not including, not tracking price data for material line items. You want to make sure that when you're working with suppliers that you are asking for the breakdown. You want to make sure that you get a line item by line item cost so that you can understand and compare across different suppliers. Sometimes this is difficult if you're working with carrier or train. Sometimes on bigger projects, they don't just give you a breakdown and you sometimes have to ask for it. But make sure you're really tracking that. It will show you where the mistakes may be and really open your eyes to what each line item is when you're doing your price comparison. And then finally, not reconciling post-delivery. This is one of the most important steps, and it's actually difficult to solve with technology if you don't have the right process in place. We have the ability for you to scan materials in and out so you can see them on your truck. This is one way of reconciling, but being able to see what you purchase versus what the package slip has is really important, and that really does allow you to see mistakes that are made before you get to a delivery before you get to delivery and mistakes. Next. So some best practices and tips that we've seen. So just a quick quote, a well-trained procurement organization can add major dollars to the organization through cost savings. This is obviously self-explanatory, but if you optimize for this, you're really setting yourself up to not only save money, but increase your margins here. Some tips that we've seen working directly with suppliers. Use one email thread per supplier. Don't try to chain them. If you add multiple suppliers to, this may sound silly, but if you add multiple suppliers to a chain and they see the other suppliers on there, they may be apprehensive about bidding on this. And also, it allows you to spread out the conversations a little bit. Use different subject lines that are easily searchable. So this is an example right here that we see work really well that we automate in our process. So having the name of your company with a pipe, the name of the job, and then the job number, so that you can use your inbox as a searching tool as well. If you're searching for a job name and you don't have the right subject line, it could be difficult to find that job, or you may have missed something. Set up a sourcing@companyname.com email and CC it to keep the records separate. You can also pass this email off to someone internally as well, so that they have the ability of logging in and seeing it, so that everything isn't stored in one email. This is a huge business risk. If you're on vacation or someone else is on vacation and there's not communication about a project and you're not able to see it, you got to make sure that someone has the ability to view this at all times. Ply does a really great job about aggregating this information. But again, if you're not at a point of software implementation, having a sourcing email really does help. Ask where you need to make your final margins to suppliers. You'd be surprised about how easy it is to negotiate sometimes. If you tell them, hey, it's great, thank you for your price, but this is kind of where we quoted, or this is where we need to be. Is there any room here? The way that suppliers will typically price out is they will have pricing bands. Let's call them like colors, like red, blue, green. They'll put different companies in different pricing bands. So you may be in a blue pricing band that has plus 5%. And by asking, they can move you down to a better pricing plan to be able to get you get the bid completed. Like I mentioned, find 5 to 8 suppliers to work with locally or out of your network, but also find a couple of e-commerce sites that you can work with as well. This is really imperative too, because you're able to very quickly do price checks. And again, you'll be surprised at what you'll find for inventory. So your local supplier may be out of it just because of demand in the local area. But those e-commerce sites have distribution centers or drop shipping centers all over the country, and they may have stocked new items on stock that you can take advantage of. This is really important. Make sure there's uniformity when you're creating emails to send out to suppliers. Create an email template where it has the name of the request, your name, the request, and then a PDF attachment so that you can send it out to suppliers. This may sound boring, but having that uniformity really does set you up for success because it eliminates any mistakes and also makes your job a little bit easier if you can create this little macro. Make sure you attach photos or model numbers or serial numbers to the email. Ply actually will generate this in a single PDF. So when it's sent out to a supplier, it will automatically be in one place. But if you attach images, make sure that you can open them, you can see them, make sure that they have the correct names. Just try to make sure it's a little bit organized for the supplier, because again, they're taking the information you give them, they're doing the research and just giving you back what you gave them. Avoid handwritten requests at all costs. Please, this is one of the biggest things I see really kill procurement requests is having written requests. Ply will intake any request and then translate that for you into something that's digital for the supplier. Because I understand sometimes it's a lot quicker to do a handwritten request, but this is really where mistakes are made. Some people have bad handwriting, me included, and it's really difficult to see those requests. And then finally, if you can, generate a detailed RFQ into a PDF, like I mentioned, and then attach all of those. All right, so let's talk about a little bit of a case study that we had early on. Go next. Okay, so a little bit about this business here. It's a 6-year-old HVAC shop, so very, very big. They have 12 separate warehouses within their organization, and they're each designated for each discipline, which you'll see in a second. There's around 80 employees at this business. There is a dedicated warehouse manager. And they do get about 3 to 6 deliveries a day. So it's a really big operation. If you're on the smaller side of this, a lot of the pain points that we're going to talk about with this case study are still pretty prevalent. Some of the problems, they had 30 years of excess inventory all built up. Now, that may sound like a gold mine, but it is insane to be able to look across all of the different disciplines and places where the excess inventory lives. And at a certain point, you just kind of lose track of everything. A lot of times, someone will purchase something and kind of they won't be able to return it. And then they'll push it off to the side and everyone forgets about it. But that one material can actually save the day if you know where it lives. They had an inability to search across the existing warehouses. There was just there's an antiquated identification process, mostly paper. And then there was an inability to see across departments, which caused over ordering. So a lot of the departments, we're ordering the same exact things that the other departments, and then just kind of increase the excess inventory. And then you couldn't quantify the market value of the inventory over time. And so you were potentially sitting on lots and lots of wasted dollars or inventory that you weren't able to account for. Next. So what did we do? And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can do this yourselves if you're wanting to take this next step here. So the first thing we did, which we'll show you an example of, is we zoned everything out. This is really important as your first step when taking an inventory audit, is no matter how big your operation is, or even if everything's in a closet, doesn't matter. Make sure you zone out the different shelves, what they mean, and start by creating that organization. If you have a larger operation that has many warehouses or a bigger warehouse, make and I will show you an example of this, but make a blueprint of that area and then zone off what those areas mean to you, or what the goal would be. Take an initial audit. So we ran an initial audit and tagged all the items to the designated locations. We moved things around. We reorganized everything so it was easier flow within the warehouse. And then we did a catalog of literally every single item. It was around, I think, 40,000 individual items. And so we cataloged each one of them so that we can at least establish a baseline. This is really difficult if you're a big operation because you can't just pause your operation. You can't just say, okay, we're going to take an inventory audit. So that's, again, back to my primary point, is making sure that everyone is on the same page about taking it slow. Like, finish one section at a time. It's okay. Catalog where you stopped and where you started, and then come back to it when you can. Just make sure that if you're putting a process in place, that you are able to come back to it, where you stopped during that day. And then finally, groom it. So have a team or software in the background that's scrubbing and matching the SKUs. Ply has a database of about 1 million products, and we're able to enrich the data that's provided to us. If you're doing this on your own, make sure you designate a person who can do the research to find the correct description or item number, so that you can search across multiple attributes when you're trying to search for products within your warehouse. Next. Okay, so here's how we did it. So again, this is an example, and if there is interest to have a document like this, I'm happy to create a free tool and template out of this. But essentially what we did was we had to first take an audit of all the materials and their attributes. And so this is a raw output of what that looks like out of our system. But we tracked the estimated value, the locations within those zones, the total completion status, so we knew exactly where we were at all times, the research and progress. So a lot of these items that we were researching were quite old, and they really needed they needed a little bit of research. So in the background, while we were actually cataloging all the items, in parallel, we were working as a team. One person was cataloging and one person was doing that research. And then finally, tracking items that you just can't find that need additional research, or just are not researchable. So on the right-hand side, there's a document here that catalogs all of the raw information. And then the bottom here, you can see kind of the output of that progress. Okay, so what happened? After we did all that, we centralized the inventory all into Ply so that they were able to actually see across every single warehouse. And again, like I mentioned, there was like 35,000 individual items now. So now the team is armed with a tool that allows them to look across the entire warehouse. So if one discipline, like the centrifuge team, needs to be able to see what the mechanical team has an inventory, because they may have something they can exchange, or they can do a transfer. There was 15% of unidentifiable or flagged as obsolete items. These are things that you can just get rid of. So you can put them on a marketplace, or you can donate them to someone else, or if it's time to get rid of them and throw them out. We don't advocate for obviously waste, but if it's time to throw them out, throw them out and get them off your shelves. It's important you understand what you need, but also what you don't need in your business, and kind of purge that out. Finally, you want to make sure that you have completed estimated value of the materials. These are assets. These are depreciating assets within your business, and you want to make sure that you know the value of that. In certain situations, we created a searchable database, as I mentioned, to increase those efficiencies. And then we were able to create some workflows for them that helped see across everything. Next. Okay, so a couple internal processes here. This is the last section before we get into some Q&A, so hopefully you guys got some questions for us. If you want to hit next. All right, so warehouse auditing. We talked a lot about warehouse auditing, but some tips here. Dedicated a project leader for this. It can be you, as an owner of the business, but just make sure everyone knows that you're the person that's going to be taking charge of the audit, so that they know to ask you questions. Create a schedule. It's really important that once you've zoned everything out, which I'll show you an example of that in a second, that you do a schedule, and don't get aggressive. Like, it's okay to do, 1 day a week or however you want to do it. Just make sure that you're not getting burnt out and you don't stop doing it. Because again, once you do this, it's really important for your business to be able to see everything you have. You do an inventory audit and tagging of each zone. So you can use stickers. We recommend barcoding. Ply has the ability to generate barcodes, and you can scan them. within our application. Cataloging of all of the inventory. Make sure you have a goal of doing everything after a certain point. And then if you're in a position to make sure that you evaluate the different softwares that are out there that allows for data scrubbing or matching products to SKUs so that you can enrich your data. This is how we started this project in the case study, but I wanted to just show you kind of the scope of it, but also how you can do this for even a small operation. So we were able to take a blueprint of the entire the entirety of the complex and then break down each different location into different tiers. And so we did an initial walkthrough of the building and was completely overwhelmed about how much we saw there. But then we worked with the owner and other teams to be able to understand what was the high value stuff, medium value and low value stuff, just in their opinion. We were still going to take an inventory of everything. But in the event that something happened, we wanted to make sure that we got the highest value out of it. If we decided to stop the project or if they just wanted to cut it at tier 3 and everything else would have maybe been thrown away or gotten rid of. Make sure you list out your questions too. In this case, there's a couple of questions about like what was something that we wanted to take an inventory of. And then list out the location. So this is really important, especially if multiple warehouses or multiple sections. Give them a name if you haven't already. This is going to be really imperative when you're going to create a schema for being able to identify items, especially larger equipment, and being able to search across that in a database. So for example, which I'll show you in a second, like barn, for example, we named it the barn zone 1. So it was like B-Z-1, and then an item number after that. And that way that you can identify very quickly, where that item could live if you were searching for it. Next. Truck stock, everyone's favorite topic. This is an example of a very messy truck. I've seen some really beautiful trucks and in taking a catalog and working with our clients. It doesn't matter what your truck looks like. You can still take inventory of it and keep truck stock. I want you to remember that you don't need to have this beautiful truck setup to keep organized. And this is one example. We cataloged everything in this example that you see on the right here. And so they were able to operate without having to gut their truck at that time. They do have intentions of doing a gut to try to get a little bit more flow and operations in there. But you don't have to gut the truck first and then take the inventory. I just want to make that clear. When you're doing initial truck stock, here's some tips I have for you. So make sure you prioritize each truck. So take each of the trucks in your fleet and make sure you have a schedule accordingly to each of them. Identify the cleanest truck and the most organized first, and start there as a model. Because if you can do that one right, and the operation will permeate down all the way to maybe the most disorganized truck, and at least you'll get a process in place and an initial audit out of the way. That way you can tackle the harder one a little bit later. And then finally, take an audit of those materials. So again, if software is in your cards, make sure you take a count, make a barcode, take an image and a description, and then create a template out of what's in that truck so that you can replicate it across all of your other trucks as well. Next. Okay, this is one of the most important things I wanted to talk about is if you have a team, it's really imperative that you make sure that you gain buy-in from the team. So again, like I mentioned, how you can become 10% more efficient in 2 weeks should be in the back of your mind when you're getting started with this. So the first step in this is getting that initial audit. It's very time consuming, but maybe build an incentive to motivate your team to keep organized. This could be time. If they want to get home earlier, this is one way to do that. They don't have to take audit of their truck at the end of the day. They can do it digitally through an app or other types of software. But really, it's important as leaders and owners that we're striving to make sure that they have the confidence that this is an efficiency. This is, yes, it's going to be hard at first, but over time, it will become more efficient for them. Changing those habits is hard. There are people in your organization that may be technology averse, and that's okay. find the people who can be your champions, and then really work with them to guide everyone else, so that you can have a bunch of different teachers as well that can teach some people who may be unwilling to take a look at technology as a way to increase their efficiencies. If you can, adopt a new technology or tool to expedite those efficiencies. Again, there are free ways of doing this. You can do this in Excel sheets. You can do this in Google Photos. They only scale to a certain point, and they will give you the foundation. But we've built the platform at Ply, and again, there are others in the market that we advocate for taking a look at. We've built this platform to be simplified, like Dave mentioned, and we've built it specifically in partnership with contractors. That is our focus. We don't have any other focus outside of that. And I already mentioned this, but make sure you find that advocate. The advocate can be you if you're a smaller organization, or it could be a young technician who's just excited about technology and wanting to make a mark. But this person can be your champion.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that is, once you find that champion, it creates a little bit of FOMO. We find like we have some customers where they have 10 trucks total. They started with 5, and those 5 became champions and drove, not envy, but it's like, oh, I want my truck like that now. I'm seeing like how efficient it is. So it almost creates a little bit of FOMO with the rest of the team.
Yeah, especially if you are in a commission structure too, and you're starting to see the young technician or the older technician who's adopting technology take on more jobs. I mean, that's just another way that they can increase their paycheck and increase revenue for the business.
So yeah, tying it all together, Darian offered some great tips there. These are tips and anecdotes from our real experience, just kind of diving in and helping, the contractors that we're working with, and, really tying it all together in summary. As Darian mentioned plenty of times, create those goals, outline them, make sure they're well known and well accepted with the team. It's definitely a team effort. The incremental progress is important, but again, there needs to be some sort of willingness to adopt as you're starting to enter the world of maximizing materials efficiency. So definitely create some goals, get alignment, make sure they're well circulated before you kick things off. Plan. So create a plan that roll up to those goals. So when are you going to start this off? Who's going to be involved initially? Where does it go from there? Really kind of create those stages so people know what to follow as you start to implement things. Take it slow. This is literally one of the biggest things we tell people as part of onboarding is like, you don't need to handle it all at once. We do have some customers where we get in right at the time where like maybe they have 3 trucks and they're quickly expanding to 5 and they're launching their first warehouse. That's a little easier, to create those like 0 to 40, 50% efficiencies. But, for bigger contractors, if you're talking about around 10 trucks, take it one step at a time, 2 trucks, 3 trucks, really kind of get a process in place and track those efficiencies along the way. And then training, just make sure that anything that's done is written down. You don't want people that help you implement this and then they leave and that knowledge is kind of out the door. You want to make sure that, anything that is done rolls into some sort of training program as you scale out the team, because as you all know, scaling happens fast. So one thing to keep in mind as you scale is how those operational efficiencies move along with that scale. So that's pretty much it. Again, Ply is here to help with simplification. There's a lot of, moving parts when it comes to materials management, especially when you're approaching, you're going from 1 to 3 million to 5 million in revenue. And that's what we're here to solve for. So hopefully this was helpful for everybody.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Dave and Darian. So this brings us over to the questions. I'll pause. I do have a few questions here, but in case anybody in the audience would like to come on screen and ask a quick question, if there's anything that you'd like it to expand on. And that's fine. Hopefully this you'll get warmed up when you hear some of the other questions that came in. So I guess the first question is, in your experience, What are some evaluation tips when considering software implementation? And what is out there that we could use?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of software out there, and Dave and I have been in the software space for more than 15 years, both in the FSM space and other. And I definitely can understand contractors having software fatigue. I mean, you're probably getting hit up multiple times a week from someone trying to sell you something new. It is definitely overwhelming, and there's a lot of great solutions out there, and there's a lot of poor solutions out there. I would first take a first step at looking at, do I need software, right? That's the first thing. If the answer is yes, then identify exactly the problems that you're trying to solve for that, and don't deviate from that when you're trying to talk with a company that is trying to provide or sell you into something. You want to make sure that it fits your company and your flow, and that the team that is building or the team that is going to be partnering with you is there to support you. That's the next thing, is ensuring that the team is genuine, and they're not a company that will promise the world and potentially not deliver. We have done this before, and we have seen those mistakes, and we're really not trying to do that here at Ply. And one of the things that we ensure is that we are very transparent about where we are with the product, ensuring that what are the things that we're working on, what are the things that we're not working on. But we do take the requests that you send very seriously, because those are the things that drive the product. When I said that we build this in partnership with our partners, I really mean that. Like, when we build product for companies, we try to ingrain ourselves as much as possible into their process, so we truly understand what the pain points are. And that's something that when you're going to evaluate these solutions, you definitely should. Pricing is obviously very important. You want to make sure that you're getting into a software product that scales with your business. So you don't want to get into something that, after you have 10 trucks, for example, gets incredibly expensive over time, and sometimes doesn't make any sense. And now you spent the last 2 years implementing this, and really seeing the benefits, but there's some diminishing returns, after you've been scaling or have an enterprise solution.
Another thing I'll just add quickly is, don't be afraid to use different software for different things. There are, software companies out there that try to do everything. And sometimes, certain elements of that everything kind of get left behind. They might just be scratching the surface. So, don't be afraid as you're starting to scale the organization to also figure out what Darren and I call your software stack. What software stack makes sense, right? Like, whether it be splitting up scheduling and invoicing in one platform, and then obviously accounting with something like QuickBooks, and then on the material side, finding something that could really help you with those operational efficiencies when it comes to materials management. Don't be afraid to kind of spread those use cases across the different software as you scale. I know it's software, it's overwhelming, especially when you're trying to get the team adopted to it. So obviously make sure the integrations are in place. Make sure, when you are talking to software companies, that there's support there to really get you onboarded. But definitely don't be afraid to leave that whole everything under one roof, because again, when you have software that tries to do everything, sometimes it gets spread a little too thin.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And just, peering in a little bit as a product manager for the last 15 years, what ends up happening is the business will rally around a certain product, and they'll build it, and then they will have to come off that product to work on something else. And so that thing that's important to you may not be touched anymore. I may be iterating very slowly at larger companies that kind of say that they do everything all in one. And that's why we took the approach of being very verticalized and being very specific, and just building something that solves the materials management piece of it, is because there's a lot there. And, we want to make sure that that's continually being improved on, and it's not being kind of left to sunset.
Okay. I'll pause again to see if anybody has any questions they have, or they want to make a comment or anything. Feel free, don't be shy. They're all shocked and awe by what you've been able to share so far.
Hopefully no one's asleep.
Okay, so let's go on. During an initial audit, Can you go into more detail about what steps to take? Like, what have you seen work and not work?
Yeah, what I see work is what I see don't work is people kind of taking off too much than they can handle, and not understanding how much work it is, but not understanding that there's huge benefits at the kind of like end of the rainbow. Again, what we've seen worked is really just like taking it slow and doing 10% at a time or whatever your goal is. When you're implementing something like this, make a list of the things you do need, but also really make sure you are listing out the things you don't need. One of the things that Ply will eventually be able to do in the future is be able to tell you inventory that's been sitting around for 6 weeks, a year, whatever, so you can get it off your truck. It's taking up space. It's something that you don't need, obviously, because you haven't been using it. So make that list of things that you do and do not need. I don't know if there's a lot of business owners on this call, but this could be something that you need to think about getting off of your plate and handing over to someone else. I know it's hard being a business owner. Like Dave and I are both business owners. We wear a lot of hats, and sometimes it's difficult to give something up. But your time is probably better spent somewhere else, building the business instead of like working in it. And these are one of those things that is a non-billable task that you don't realize is non-billable, that just needs to get done, that can definitely be handed off to someone else with the right training and right tools and right support system. So definitely making sure that you have an advocate.
Fantastic. Okay. One more time opportunity. Does anybody have any questions?
You could drop them in chat too, if you have any.
Okay. Any tips on dealing with a difficult supplier?
Oh man. There's a lot of them out there, and again, there's a lot of great ones too. I think one of the things that we've learned with working with a difficult supplier, a couple things. One is make sure that you have a list of suppliers that that you've vetted out. When you work with Ply, like we do vet out suppliers and make sure that they're responsive and they provide fair pricing, and they're easy to work with. I would say make sure you have a contingency plan, and that's why we say get 5 to 8 quotes for a project sometimes, because there may be a situation where you've committed and you have to kind of change direction and find another supplier that will better fit your needs, and you have to drop that one for that time. A lot of times when you're dealing with suppliers, some of these problems aren't theirs. They're kind of like as you all probably well know, but they're kind of like the pass through when they especially work with like a OEM or manufacturer. They kind of they're getting the information from them, and then they're internalizing and they're passing it to you. And sometimes it's not their fault. It's sometimes the manufacturer's fault or supply chain's fault. But at the end of the day, I think we're all just trying to get to finishing projects, and no one wants to burn a bridge. But I think at a certain point you do have to disconnect from the supplier, especially if they've caused some havoc within your business. And that's why I say have a contingency, have a list that you can work with.
Yeah, the other thing just to add to that is make sure you're checking them once in a while. I think it's good to have that solid relationship, but we talk to a lot of contractors where they haven't really checked around on pricing just to make sure that they were getting fair pricing over time, only to find out that, if they built a relationship with another local supplier, they could have cut down on, 5 to 10% margins. So it's transactional at the end of the day. Those relationships are important, but keep in mind that, anything that could impact bottom line, you should at least be, checking on that for peace of mind.
Good point. And, we've worked with some really great suppliers. I think the great ones are the ones that really do care about your business and will go the extra mile, even if they're not going to like close the deal. We've worked with a few where, they didn't have the product, but they helped us find a person in their network to find it, right? That's an amazing supplier. That's someone who cares about that relationship and really cares about that business. And we have a lot of suppliers that just don't even answer their phone, and it sucks because I think a lot of this the services that you provide are in some cases critical to survival. If you're working on a hospital, if you're working on an apartment complex and the heat goes out, or the AC is out and there's elderly people or children, and it sucks sometimes because when you start to break it down like that, this is a basic necessity that we need. And if someone is just blocking it for monetary reasons, or because you're a small business and you're not giving them that $1 million job, that's something that rings true to me. And when we find that, it's something that we remember and we internalize as a team. So.
Sorry, a little difficult to get to my mute button. Thank you. Okay, so heads up. I know that it's pretty quiet, but I've been DMing with people in the chat, and we're already, everything is being nicely covered, and we're getting a lot of thumbs up. So everybody likes to hear good feedback, everyone. So just putting that out there. And even if you have anything to share, if you have an example or an experience that you'd like to share with the people on the call, this is the place for us to talk about it. So don't be shy again. But another question, what analytics would you track for success for materials management? Like what would we do with that information?
Yeah, I mean, at a baseline, you want to know what you have. Even if you're not tracking, pricing or costing or any of the other attributes that like Ply will help you track, just making sure that you have a list of the name of the product, the count, and maybe like a description. If there is interest after this, I'm happy to take, what we did for the raw data and make a template out of it. So you can kind of kickstart your own auditing process and tracking if your software doesn't handle that. But at a bare minimum, being able to track the quantity of those things, even if it's like slightly incorrect, it's better than nothing. Because then you can at least say, oh, I used to have this, instead of saying I'm not sure. And that to me is like way more important, for a technician, and then you can kind of triage from there. But yeah, those are the basics. What I would do with to expand on that, one of the things when you do implement a piece of software is you'll be able to ensure that you see the costing per product or per category. And this is important for your profit margins. Some people that we work with in the beginning have no idea how much they know what they're buying it for, but sometimes they don't know how much what their margins are on a particular category or particular item. And if you're moving so fast, it's hard. Sometimes technicians aren't tracking things. They're taking things out of bins and not billing it to customers. And not having that type of visibility or transparency can definitely hurt a business over the long run. It may only be a $20 part that one time, but if you extrapolate that up, 5 technicians, $20 part once a week, you're talking about thousands of dollars of untracked inventory going to your customers. And if you're a charity, that's totally cool and rad. But you want to make sure that if you're a business and you're trying to establish a profit, being able to understand those costing, those profit margins are very, very important. And then finally, again, I keep stressing this, but knowing what you have and knowing what you don't need is also very important. I think in this next phase of service and technician companies is trying to remain lean on warehousing and inventory. A great, efficient business carries little inventory, because they have the processes in place to go to their local supply shop when they need to, or ordering it from some other place like Ply, where you don't have to hold a lot of inventory and you can get it quickly and efficiently, and you don't even need to set yourself up to have those mistakes for having excess inventory. So really knowing what you don't need, in that initial audit is important as well.
And two, I know it's a lot, but 2 additional things. I think tracking estimates versus actuals. So, a lot of customers will rely on the price book to, collect estimates on a, monthly or bi-monthly basis, but track that against what you're actually paying. Because, you can bid on a job, get certain pricing, but it doesn't close for 2 months. And before you know it, it's, 5% increase in materials, right? So tracking that over time. And then on the management, on the inventory side, making sure you're very explicit about tracking materials in, materials out, because we work with customers where they went from being reactive on purchasing, where they're purchasing on a daily basis, to getting them to the point where maybe they're purchasing bi-monthly, because we had enough data to say, hey, if you buy this in bulk, based on your historical replenishment data, you can actually not only save money, but you're having to make less trips to the supply house or rely on less delivery. So definitely track materials in, materials out once you get, the operations in place to do so. But that's really going to help you, think about replenishing proactively.
Yeah. And it takes time. I do want to stress that it does take a little bit of time to establish that baseline, especially if you have some habits in the business that need to be changed, and you've been operating a certain way for 10 years. Software is great, but it does take a little bit of time to kind of see that through as well.
Okay. All right. So one more time, does anybody have any thoughts or comments that they'd like to add? This is an interactive conversation, so don't be shy. I see Anthony is smiling. I think he has something he wants to say, but no. Okay. Well, shout out to my Pittsburgh Steelers fan over there. All right. Actually, would you mind coming on and telling us where you're from, Anthony? Would you mind doing that? Unmuting. Just unmute yourself.
Actually, I'm in, how you doing? I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice.
Wonderful. And what exactly do you do, Anthony?
We do bridge reconstruction.
Nice. Cool.
Rehab.
Nice.
Awesome.
Okay. I had to shout you out. I'm from Pennsylvania, so anybody. Okay. So one more question.
Sure.
Tech have different technical abilities. How would you recommend changing processes so it's adopted and not just brushed off?
Yeah, we've seen this a lot, and we've seen people just kind of get frustrated and just stop using the software, and those are cases that will happen. I think the first thing is really getting some support with the team, right? If you've established someone who is and can be an advocate for adopting technology, like start there. Like make them special, right? Like make them have access and trying this thing. Maybe some people will make fun of them because they're like, oh, another piece of technology, haha, that's funny. But eventually, if you stick with it, that person will show what the dividends would be. So I would say, like, number one is definitely finding that advocate, like we've mentioned. Dave mentioned training. It's very important. Just like if you're, a skilled trade professional who needs, yearly training, it's the same thing. You should have a process, especially if you're a business owner, in place to do training on software, quarterly, annually, whatever the case may be, even if it's just a refresher, because software changes a lot. We do a release every week, and it has new features and functionality, and things change and move around. So it's important that you utilize the software company to do that type of training. They offer it. And finally, just making sure you develop a culture where they have an input, in the evaluation period. Find that advocate, bring them along in the process, have them go through a demo of the product with you, and be that champion, so they can also give you that real feedback. Because sometimes, as an owner of the business, you may not be using the software as much as other people. You're purchasing this tool just like you would purchase, a tool on your truck. It's not like you're using that tool in that truck all the time. That's for the tech, and so it's the same thing. This is a tool that your team is using. So make sure they have the ability of starting from the beginning with you.
Yeah, and just to piggyback, I mean, find the biggest pain point that you have, and then find I think it's important to grow into certain software, but don't feel like you need to spend thousands of dollars on like a service titan just because like the contractor down the street is. I think identify what your actual pain points are with your team, and then find something that can help solve those pain points.
Okay, well, that brings us to time. So thank you, Darian and Dave, again for a fantastic presentation. We've definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody here is going to have their notes, be taking notes furiously and using it in the future. But you can learn more about ToughLeaf by visiting toughleaf.com. And to connect with Ply and our other partners, please feel free to go to toughleaf.com/partners. And finally, you can keep up with us on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and of course, LinkedIn. Thanks again, Dave and Darian from Ply for being here today. We look forward to serving our mission with your partnership. And until next time, thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.